Sometime in the past 2 weeks, an aircraft landed in Boise, Idaho, and the people who walked off it were dressed for the wrong hemisphere. It was the middle of an American August, 90-degree afternoons, smoke sitting down in the valleys like dirty water, and the men and women coming down those steps had just left their own winter behind. Some of them had flown close to 8,000 miles to get there. They went through orientation on a Friday, a national situation briefing on a Saturday, and within days a number of them were standing on a fire line in Oregon that had already consumed more than 90,000 acres. They are there because the United States asked them to come. Not as a courtesy visit, not as an exchange program with a photograph at the end of it. The National Interagency Fire Center in Boise put out a request for help, and Australia and New Zealand answered it in the middle of their own off-season because the American fire season has grown larger than the American Fire Force can cover on its own. That is the story. And the number sitting underneath it is worse than most people watching this have been told, because the agency that publishes that number has stated in its own written outlook that the figure is too low. I want to walk you through exactly where that number comes from, why it is almost certainly an undercount, what the highest alert level in the American firefighting system really means for a house in a dry county, and what the calendar says about the next 8 weeks. If you want this explained properly instead of shouted at you, subscribe. This channel follows these numbers all year, not just on the bad days. Here is the figure as it stands right now. So far this year, firefighters in the United States have responded to 48,960 wildfires, and those fires have burned more than 7.2 million acres. That is 129% of the 10-year average for the number of fires and 169% of the 10-year average for the acres. Those percentages are the part people skim past. Do not skim them. The fire count is up modestly. The burned area is up enormously, which means the average fire this year is not just more common, it is bigger. Something is letting individual fires run further before anyone can get a line around them. Now let me make 7.2 million acres into something you can actually picture, because acres are a unit almost nobody carries in their head. 7.2 million acres works out to roughly 11,250 square miles. That is more land than the entire state of Massachusetts. If you gathered all of it into a single square, that square would measure about 106 miles on each side. You would drive for the better part of 2 hours at highway speed just to travel along one edge of it, not across it. Along one side, and it is spread across a country, in pieces, from Alaska down to the southern plains. Here is another way to feel it. 48,960 fires spread over the days since the 1st of January comes out to about 213 new fire starts every single day. Every day since New Year's. Most of them stopped inside 24 hours by people whose names you will never learn in a stage of the job called initial attack, which is the reason those thousands of ignitions do not appear on any map you have ever seen. That is the quiet backbone of this whole system. The vast majority of wildfires never become news because someone got there in the first few hours. Hold on to that sentence. It becomes the most important sentence in this video a little later on. So why did this year break open? The answer starts with snow that never arrived. Fire officials in the Pacific Northwest have pointed to record low winter snowpack, followed by ongoing drought, as the reason live and dead fuels went critically dry across the region. Fuels is the word firefighters use for everything that can burn grass, brush, dead needles, standing timber, the collapsed remains of last year's growth. Every one of those things carries moisture. Snowpack is what keeps that moisture in the ground through spring and into early summer. It melts slowly, it soaks in, and it buys the landscape weeks of protection at the front end of the season. Take the snow away and the whole calendar slides forward. Grass cures brown in June instead of late July. Dead wood that would normally hold a little dampness in its core dries all the way through, and the forest arrives at August already primed. Then, in the second half of July, the lightning came. Major lightning outbreaks moved across the Northwest and sparked fires across an enormous area at once. That is a distinction worth understanding. A human-caused fire tends to start near a road, near a town, near somebody who can call it in. Lightning starts fires in places nobody is standing, sometimes dozens at a time, sometimes in terrain a truck cannot reach. And when 100 of them ignite in the same window, the arithmetic of firefighting inverts. You are no longer choosing how to fight a fire, you are choosing which fires you will not fight today. That is the moment the season changed. On the 18th of July, the National Multi-Agency Coordinating Group in Boise raised the National Preparedness Level to 5 out of 5, the top of the scale, and it has stayed there ever since. Now here is where I have to slow you down, because this is the single most misunderstood number in American wildfire coverage, and getting it wrong makes people frightened about the wrong thing. Preparedness Level 5 is not a weather forecast. It is not a prediction that any particular town is about to burn. It is not a hazard rating for your county. You could be at Preparedness Level 5 on a rainy Tuesday. It is a statement about inventory. Think of the national firefighting force the way you might think of a blood supply. There is a shared national reserve. Hospitals draw from it. On an ordinary week, nobody thinks about it because it is there. But if the reserve gets drawn down far enough, the shortage does not announce itself in your town with sirens. It shows up on one specific day, the day somebody needs it, and the shelf is thinner than it should be. That is Preparedness Level 5. National resources are committed on an ongoing basis. Quieter regions are drawn down toward their minimum staffing so the busy ones can hold. Fire managers in the active areas are taking emergency measures just to keep operations running. And the practical translation for a household is not drama, it is response speed. Remember what I told you to hold on to, that the vast majority of fires are stopped in the first 24 hours. That statistic is not a law of nature. It is a product of resources arriving fast. A new fire starting today in a county that has already sent its engines and its crews and its aircraft somewhere else may not draw the response it would have drawn in June. The initial attack that quietly kills thousands of fires a year gets slower, and a fire that gets an extra 90 minutes of freedom in cured grass and afternoon wind is not the same fire anymore. That is the honest version of Preparedness Level 5, and I would argue it is more alarming than the cartoon version, not less, because it is a real mechanism and it applies to places that have not seen a single flame this year. Spokane, Washington found out what that looks like on the 1st of August. 3 fires broke out around the city that afternoon: the Old Trails Fire north of Airway Heights, the Autumn Lane Fire near 5 Mile Falls, and the Fairview Fire near Meade. The National Weather Service had issued a red flag warning, and with it, Washington's first ever particularly dangerous situation designation for parts of eastern Washington: sustained wind, bone-dry fuels. All 3 fires ran east. By that Sunday morning, the Washington State Emergency Operations Center estimated roughly 700 structures destroyed, a great many of them homes. More than 65,000 people were under evacuation orders in and around a city of about 230,000. The 3 fires were grouped together and given a single name: the Spokane Complex. The governor declared a statewide emergency and issued a burn ban running through the end of September. A federal disaster request was approved. Spokane's mayor described it as the worst natural disaster the region has faced. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office initially received something like 290 missing person reports. By that Monday, all but about 14 had been cleared, and officials cautioned that the remaining ones were more likely to reflect people who had evacuated and simply had not called anybody than people caught in the fire. No major injuries or deaths had been confirmed at that point. In a fire that took hundreds of homes in an afternoon, inside a metropolitan area, that outcome is not luck. It is evacuation orders that went out fast and neighborhoods that moved when told. And there is one more detail on Spokane that belongs in this story. Investigators determined the largest of the 3 fires was deliberately set. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office announced an arson arrest in connection with the Old Trails Fire, with the suspect held on a $1 million bond. The causes of the other 2 remained under investigation. 640 structures were destroyed in that one fire alone. I have covered a lot of these events, and that specific pairing is the one that stays with me. A landscape dried out over an entire winter of missing snow, a firefighting system already stretched thin across a continent, and then a single human decision on a windy afternoon. Every part of the chain mattered. Remove any one of them, and the number of lost homes is different. If you have ever had to leave your house with an hour's notice, fire, flood, storm, anything, tell me in the comments what you took and what you left. Those replies are consistently more useful than any preparedness checklist I could read you. Now, back to the people who flew in from the other hemisphere. The scale of what the Northwest is carrying explains why the request went out. That single geographic area has been the most active fire region in the country for weeks. At one point in mid-August, the Northwest Coordination Center was managing 54 incidents covering more than 2.7 million cumulative acres, with well over 17,000 personnel assigned to that region alone. Individual fires there have reached sizes that are hard to hold in your mind. The Big Grass Fire, burning across southern Malheur County in Oregon and Owyhee County in Idaho, passed 578,000 acres. That is roughly 900 square miles, about 3/4 the size of the state of Rhode Island, inside one fire perimeter. The Sinlahecken Fire west of Tonasket, Washington, has run past 152,000 acres. The Grasshopper Fire north of Sportsman's Park, Oregon, started in late July from a natural cause and has burned somewhere around 90,000 acres. Nationally, close to 29,000 personnel have been assigned to wildfire incidents. Think about what that means logistically. That is a workforce the size of a small city, fed, housed, moved, resupplied, medically covered, and rotated, mostly out of tents and truck beds and gravel lots in smoke for months, and it was still not enough depth. So the call went out through a long-standing arrangement with the Australian and New Zealand National Council for Fire and Emergency Services. Personnel came in more than one wave. An early group of about 74 incident management, liaison, and ground crew arrived in Boise in late July, including a 15-person incident management team assigned to a fire in the Umpqua National Forest in Oregon. New Zealand sent a 5-person team embedded into incident management to cover planning, intelligence, operations, supervision, aviation coordination, and leadership. Then a larger contingent followed in the second week of August, reported as up to 250 fire specialists arriving in Boise for orientation and national situation briefings. Across all three contingents, more than 300 personnel have been deployed, based at the National Interagency Fire Center and sent out to communities as the need moves. The partnership was set for roughly 1 month. On the 11th of August, an Australia and New Zealand incident management team took over at the Grasshopper Fire during what officials described as that fire's most unpredictable 24 hours. Canada is in it as well. 2 large air tankers and a Bird Dog aircraft from Manitoba have been operating out of Boise. A Bird Dog is the lead plane. It flies the run first, reads the terrain and the smoke column, and guides the tanker onto the drop. It is one of the more demanding flying jobs in existence, and it is being done over American forests by Canadian crews this summer. And the United States Army has been drawn in too. Roughly 240 soldiers from a battalion based at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington were deployed to support operations on one Washington fire. Now here is the calibration this story needs, and I am not going to skip it, because it is the difference between understanding this and being manipulated by it. International wildfire exchange is not new. It is not a sign of collapse. The United States, Australia, and New Zealand have traded fire personnel for years, precisely because the seasons sit on opposite ends of the calendar. Their summer is the American winter. When Australia burns, Americans fly south. A group of 71 Australian and New Zealand fire managers came to the United States in August of 2024 for exactly this reason. Officials described the arrangement as strengthening operational capability and exchanging knowledge, and every international specialist is qualified to United States wildland fire standards and embedded inside American incident command structures. Nobody is freelancing. So the headline is not "Australia had to rescue America." That would be false, and it would insult a partnership that runs both directions. The real story is the scale and the frequency. 3 contingents in one season, 300 plus people, military support on top of it, Canadian aircraft flying out of Boise. That is the signal, not that help exists, but how much of it was needed at once and how normal that has become. Which brings me to the strangest part of this entire season, and the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. The 7.2 million acre figure is probably wrong, not inflated, low. In its August outlook, the same agency that publishes the daily totals stated that at the end of July, its situation report system accounted for 4.8 million acres, and that this total is known to be an underestimation. The document says so directly. It flagged the Northwest specifically, where large fires were collectively adding more than 100,000 acres a day. Let that arithmetic land. 100,000 acres in a day is about 156 square miles. Break it down further, and it comes to roughly 70 acres a minute. Around the clock, something close to 70 football fields disappearing every 60 seconds, all night, while nobody is watching. Using a different federal reporting application, that same outlook put the year-to-date figure at a minimum of 6.2 million acres, roughly 1.4 million acres higher than the daily tally, and it noted that other information suggested the national total had already passed 7 million at the end of July. Sit with the size of that discrepancy for a moment. 1.4 million acres is about 2,180 square miles. The gap between two official federal counts was, by itself, larger than the entire state of Delaware. This is not a scandal, and I want to be careful here. It is a reporting lag, and it is honest about itself. The daily incident report is built to move fast. It is a management tool for people deciding where to send crews tomorrow morning, not an accounting ledger. When fires are growing faster than mapping flights and perimeter updates can keep pace, the operational number falls behind reality. The system is designed to be current, not final. Final numbers come later, from a different process. But it means something for how you read every headline this summer. When a report says 7.2 million acres, you are reading a floor, not a ceiling. The real figure is somewhere above it, and nobody will know how far above until the season closes and the perimeters are properly mapped. Now, the other correction, and this one cuts the other way, so I will give it the same weight. This is not the worst American fire season on record, not close by acreage. Both 2015 and 2020 pushed past 10 million acres nationally. 7.2 million is a severe season by any measure, and it is running far above the 10-year average. But the 10 million acre years happened inside living memory for anyone watching this, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. What makes this year distinctive is not that it set a national record, it is the combination. A Northwest that is carrying an extraordinary share of the total, a severe destructive event inside a metropolitan area, 2 federal counts disagreeing by more than a Delaware, Preparedness Level 5 holding for a month straight, international and military support layered on at 3 separate levels. That combination is the story, and it does not need a fake record attached to it. So what happens now? The August outlook showed above normal significant fire potential across a broad section of the western and north-central United States, with a developing area of concern over the southern plains and the lower Mississippi Valley. Above normal means a greater than usual likelihood that significant wildland fires will occur. It is a probability statement, not a promise. And it says nothing about which specific place. Some of the pressure is coming off in places. Containment lines have grown on several major incidents, and rounds of thunderstorms across Oregon and Washington in mid-August brought cooler temperatures and higher humidity to parts of the region. But those same thunderstorms are the problem. Lightning without meaningful rain has been sparking new starts even as older fires are being wrapped up, and the Northwest was still counting more than 30 uncontained large fires as of the middle of this week. Meanwhile, the fuel situation has not been repaired by a few storms. Drought conditions still cover more than 2/3 of the West. A dry landscape does not recover from a wet weekend, it recovers from a season, and the season is not over. In the Northwest and the Northern Rockies, the reliable end of large fire activity is usually the first sustained autumn pattern change meaningful rain over multiple days, shorter afternoons, cool nights that let humidity recover. That typically arrives in September, sometimes not until October. In California, the most dangerous stretch of the entire year often falls after the rest of the country has stopped paying attention, when offshore wind events line up with fuels that have not seen rain since spring. So here is what I am watching, and what I would suggest you watch with me. First, the preparedness level itself. If it drops from 5 to 4, that is the clearest single indicator that national capacity has loosened, that engines and crews and aircraft are becoming available again, and that a new fire in a quiet county will get the response it would have gotten in June. Second, the departure of the international contingents. The Australia and New Zealand partnership was set for about a month. Whether it is extended tells you more about the American resource picture than any press release will. Third, the Southern Plains and the Lower Mississippi Valley. That is the part of the August outlook almost nobody covered, and it sits well outside the region everyone is currently looking at. And fourth, the final acreage number. Not the daily one. The one that gets reconciled after the perimeters are mapped and the season closes. Based on what the agency has already admitted about its own counting, I would expect that final figure to land noticeably above what you are being told this week. For anyone living in a dry county right now, the practical part is small and unglamorous. Know your evacuation zone before you need it. Have one bag that does not need to be assembled at midnight. And understand that the burn bans in effect across several western states are not bureaucratic irritation. The largest fire in the Spokane complex was set on purpose, but hundreds of destructive fires every year start from a yard debris pile that someone thought was out. 213 new fires a day, most stopped in the first 24 hours by people you will never meet. That system has been running at its limit since the 18th of July. And it is now being held up by air crews from Manitoba, incident managers from Wellington and Melbourne, and soldiers from a base in Washington state. The next real signal comes when the preparedness level finally moves, and when the first genuine autumn rain pattern crosses the Cascades. I will be covering both. Subscribe and turn on the bell if you want that update the day it happens, along with the final acreage figure when the season closes, and we find out how far under the truth the daily number really was. The people who flew across the world to be here have a month on their contract. The fires do not.